Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I'm Zeckthar,
And I'm Yuksen.
and we are the chroniclers of all that was, and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We've seen the rise and fall of many empires, and this week we will be looking into the newest empire in the Milky Way system, the Tau.
That's right, Zeckthar. The space commies. Although fairly new, they're fairly advanced in technology, as well as having a strange concept of working with others as opposed to simply murdering those that don't look like them. This month, we will be discussing the unusual beginning of this race, their caste system, and how they work with the rest of the races of 40k, as well as the oldie but goodie notable characters.
Indeed, brother. I can't wait to talk about Commander Farsight. He is one of my favorites. But before we get started, if you enjoy our voxes of the history of the Milky Way system, feel free to subscribe, comment, follow, and like. And if you really like our stuff, please join our membership squad on the YouTube channel, Tales of Asharaka. With your support, we can continue to build and grow our voxes, as well as some cool extra stuff for you guys that join.
Now, if you're listening on Spotify, don't worry, you can help as well. If you click the support podcast button on any of the descriptions on Spotify, you can donate to our success too. Well, I think that covers our intro, but tell me, Zeckthar, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, Yuksen, I figured we should start with the origins of this young race. Now, the exact date of the founding of the Tau Empire in the imperial calendar is unclear. What is known is that only 6,000 standard years ago, in the 35th millennium, an Adeptus Mechanicus explorator fleet discovered the Tau homeworld of Tau and determined that its population of intelligent Xenos were a primitive people at the Stone Age level of deployment, having only just mastered fire. Since then, the Tau have developed very rapidly into a spacefaring species. Earlier in their history, during the period known as the Mon Tau, the Tau were a culture built upon warring tribes. During this time, the Tau's legends tell of the first appearance of the Ethereals at the city of Phioton. The fortress city of Phioton was under assault by the Tau warriors from the plains. Though negotiations had been attempted, the fierce plains warriors would settle for nothing less than the annihilation of the city of Phioton. For 5 long years, the inhabitants held off the savage assaults with their thick walls and plentiful cannons. However, disease and starvation began to take their toll. As the tide of the siege turned, 2 mysterious Tau appeared. One made his way into the camps of the plains Tau, exuding a quiet authority that no Tau was able to resist. Soon the leader of the plains warriors was persuaded to parley with the settled Tau of the Phioton. Similarly, the other mysterious Tau made his way deep into the fortress. Within a few short hours, the gates stood wide open, and the Tau of both sides stood ready to talk. The Ethereals spoke of the importance of peace and understanding between all Tau. They described a greater good that each Tau must strive towards. The besiegers and the besieged quickly agreed with the Ethereals, and a truce was reached. Across the world of Tau, Ethereals emerged, each with the same quiet authority and message of harmony and cooperation. With the Tau united, they were able to rapidly develop their civilization's technology, ultimately attaining spacefaring capabilities. In a very short time, I might add. 6,000 years? That's pretty good. Anyways, the Tau Empire soon expanded its borders through a series of so-called spheres of expansion. The Tau Empire has gone through 5 main phases of expansion as of the era Indominus in the 41st millennium. These phases are marked by Tau military campaigns during which new worlds and star systems are colonized, conquered, and sometimes peacefully persuaded to accept the greater good through diplomacy and a manifest demonstration of the benefits provided by advanced Tau technology. Now, apart from the star systems directly colonized and exploited by the Tau, which are known as seps, the Tau Empire also includes the worlds and star systems belonging to the species of the Kroot, Vespid, and Nekasar. The Tau Empire is composed of over 20 fully developed seps and around 100 settled worlds, but the exact number and most of their names are unknown to the Imperium of Man. A known splinter faction amongst the Tau are the Farsight Enclaves, founded beyond the Damocles Gulf by the Tau commander Farsight against the orders of the Ethereals. More recently, some worlds and star systems of the Imperium have been conquered by the forces of the Tau, while a handful have seceded from the Imperium outright and pledged their allegiance to the Tao Empire and the greater good. Now, if you have heard anything about the Tao, you have probably heard the socialist aspect known as the greater good, or Tauva. This is the central philosophy that unites all Tao. It teaches that every self aware being is equal and plays an important part in Tao society. It tells its adherents to put away petty squabbles and unnecessary things to unite for the greater good of the rest of their species and of all other intelligent species in the galaxy. The Tao have no desire to destroy another intelligent species' religion or culture, though it may not mean that the Tao respect their right to live as they please. However, while they embrace this ideology, and even some imperial worlds have willingly joined the Tao Empire, other species fiercely resist adhering to the greater good to pursue their own freedoms, much to the dismay of the Tao, who see these desires as selfish and unenlightened. Now, another part of the greater good is the caste system that every Tao is part of, but we will get to that in a moment. Why I bring this up is because depending on what caste you are talking to, the Tao will have a slightly difference in look and appearance. This was initially a result of adaptation and evolution to suit the different environments each group of the proto-Tau species found themselves in on their homeworld of Tau, although interbreeding between the castes was later forbidden by the ethereals. The Tau are humanoid in shape, although they have hooved feet and four-digit hands, 3 fingers and 1 thumb. Their skin is gray-blue, although this can vary in pigmentation between Tau seps and colony worlds, which kind of makes sense. Their skin is rough in texture, leathery, and exudes almost no moisture. Their faces are flat, wide around the eyes, with an eye-shaped slit running from the center of the forehead to where a human's nose would be. Now, Tau's vision is considered slightly superior to that of humans. Their visual spectrum extends a little more into the ultraviolet and infrared wavelengths. However, their pupils do not dilate, giving poor depth perception and providing slower vision focusing reflexes than humans, particularly in low light conditions. The olfactory organs of the Tau are also, ironically, inside the mouth. Now, physical strength and size varies between the Tau caste, with the fire caste being the strongest of their kind, roughly the size and slightly weaker than the average baseline human, because the Tau homeworld has gravity slightly weaker than that of Terra. Interestingly, only 2 female Tau have ever been illustrated. The first, Commander Shadow's son, appeared to have a more human face than male Tau, being smoother and sleeker with larger eyes, a nose-like facial feature, and a Y-shaped facial slit. It is not known, however, whether Shadow's son is representative of all female Tau. The second known Tau female, the subject of imperial dissection by the Magi of the Adeptus Mechanicus, had the facial characteristics of a male Tau. Now, the Tau do not possess psychers, and as a result have little knowledge of the immaterium beyond its existence. This gives them some level of resistance to warp-based powers affecting the mind, but offers little, if any, protection against physically manifested offensive psychic powers. This is because the Tau have virtually no psychic presence in the warp. To a demon, or any psyker possessed of the witch sight, they appear to be shifting will-o'-the-wisps rather than the burning fire that represents the human soul. As such, Tau can never possess or develop psychic powers. The Tau are largely unaware of the perils of the immaterium, and for this reason have conducted research into the nature of the warp on Medusa 5. However, the conclusion was reached that further research was unfeasible, and that the warp is no place for the greater good, and is best left to those foolhardy races who cannot pull back from that terrible realm. The ethereal caste members also have a diamond-shaped bony ridge on their head. It is believed by imperial scholars that through this organ the ethereals exert a pheromone-based or latent psychic control of the other Tau caste to keep them focused on the greater good. But this is mere speculation, more than likely propaganda, as there is no evidence of this being found. Due to their notable absence of psychic abilities, though, the Tau have no equivalent to the navigators of the Imperium, forcing them to travel at sublight relativistic speeds. Their interstellar vessels therefore take much longer than Imperial vessels to traverse the vast distances between the stars, which is one reason their empire has expanded relatively slow over the centuries. The Tau warriors receive only limited training in the arts of close combat, usually depending on recruit mercenaries to fight in those horrible melees so common in the 41st millennium battles. However, due to the Tau's superior range of vision and the electromagnetic spectrum, and the predilection for patience, the Tau have proven themselves to be extremely efficient sharpshooters, with the ranged plasma weapons and railguns they primarily rely upon. The Tau tend to look upon other intelligent species as backwards or misguided. Before the commencement of hostilities, they almost always try to reason with their opponents and establish some kind of agreement that will make the use of military force unnecessary. Now, noted exceptions to this policy are Tau battles with the orcs, Tyranids, and the forces of chaos, with whom the Tau have little to no diplomatic relations. This is due to the fact that Tau see no way to reason with them and do not want them in their empire.
Yeah, negotiations with an orc normally requires an axe and a gun.
Quite right, Yuksen. While they do tend to prefer to negotiate and find peaceful alternatives to war, don't let this fool you. When pushed, they do wield powerful weapons of war, and their technology is far more advanced than humanity. Also, keep in mind that they are still an expansionist empire and are ever expanding, which leads to confrontations with the Imperium of Man. An example of this would be the Damocles Crusade. This was the very first military conflict fought between the Imperium of Man and the Tau Empire in the Lethesh sector of the Ultima Segmentum near the galaxy's eastern fringes during the 41st millennium. Before the Crusade, members of the Tau water caste had established trade agreements with imperial worlds on the frontier of the Tau Empire, near the Damocles Gulf region of the Ultima Segmentum in the galactic east, and exchanges of goods and technology were common. Now, alarmed by the threat of alien contamination, the Administratum readied a suitable response. Almost a Terran century later, the Damocles Crusade smashed into Tau space, destroying several outlying settlements and pushing deep into Tau space. When the Imperial fleet reached the Tau Sep world of Delaith Prime, however, the crusade ground to a bloody stalemate as the formidable numbers and high technology of the Tau and their recruit allies thwarted every attempt to capture the world or its star system. Many solar months of terrible fighting ensued, with nothing gained on either side. By the late 742.M41, the Crusaders' commanders eventually agreed to requests from the Tau water caste for peace talks. The negotiations were successful, and the Imperial fleet withdrew from Tau space unmolested. The reason partly due to the impending approach of the tyrant hive fleet, Behemoth. Now, the Tau Empire was invaded by the Tyranids, and it was Tyranid Hive Fleet Gorgon, a splinter fleet of the much larger fleet Behemoth, in 899.M41. The Tyranids of Hive Fleet Gorgon were exceptional in their ability to quickly adapt on a biological level to new circumstances of battle, such as evolving immunity to the Tau's energy-based weaponry, which, as you could probably guess, didn't go too terribly well for the Tau. This rapid pace of defensive adaptation may have been unique to the Tyranid breeds of the Hive Fleet Gorgon, or it may have been a response to conflict with the Tau, who are also highly adaptable species, albeit on a technological rather than biological level. The combined forces of the Tau and the Imperium's Astra Militarum destroyed Hive Fleet Gorgon in 903.M41, though only after both humanity and the Tau lost several colony worlds to the rapacious Tyranids. Now, at some point, the Tau sent an expeditionary force to the Imperial planet Malbid, where they came into conflict with the Ultramarines in 936.M41. However, the planet proved to be a cursed tomb world, when the fighting of the Tau and the Ultramarines awakened the sleeping Necrons from their tomb beneath the surface. In an effort to combat this terrible threat to both species, the Tau and the Ultramarines combined their forces to defeat the Necrons. Once the conflict was over, the Tau were allowed to evacuate their forces by the Ultramarines chapter master, Marnius Calgar, who proceeded to destroy Malbrid through the use of exterminatus order. Now, sometimes things are more what you would think when a xenospecies comes in contact with the Imperium, which is bloody conflict. A good example of this took place in 966.M41, when the Tau fought against the Astartes of the Space Wolves chapter during the war for Cavarium Alpha. On the ocean world, the Space Wolves drop pods landed deep in the oceans where their occupants, their power armor altered by the Space Wolf tech marines to operate in undersea environments, made a move to engage their enemy. On the surface, the battle was fought between the two sides with an equally deadly conflict, erupting in the depths of the sea between the Space Wolves and the Tau battlesuits. Thunderhawk gunships armed with torpedoes, prop bombs, and missiles were used to great effect against the Tau's Hammerhead tanks and Manta gunships. Ultimately, the Space Wolves proved to be the victor in the conflict, though hundreds of Tau and Space Wolf corpses floated to the surface of Cavarium Alpha's World Sea. With their mission complete, the Space Wolves made the long trek back to land across the seabed. Now, we will go more into how they deal with the Empire of Man next week, along with how they get along with everyone else. But do you have any thoughts on this younger race of idealists?
One of the things I would like to mention, not necessarily in case of them, but more of the Imperium's viewpoint of them, is I find it interesting how they jump from, yeah, they're devoid of all psychic abilities, then, but their leaders have psychic abilities, probably, to control the masses. Like, will contradict everything. So, anyways, I just thought that was funny.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
the speed of adaptation is amazing in my viewpoint, and especially when, well, in comparison to the Imperium, which has stopped
yeah,
evolving pretty much anything.
technologically, yeah. But I mean, not only that, but the concept of 6,000 years. They went from working with rock tools and I made fire to flying spaceships. That's that's a pretty short time to get all that
Yeah.
done. I mean, yeah.
Well, they did have a little bit of help concerning that,
What
which
do you
we'll
mean?
discuss a little later.
Well, oh, okay. Oh, you're talking about the Casa or the the space polar bears?
No, no, no.
No.
There's a couple of other things. One of
Oh,
them being a group that we discussed already. But
oh.
anyways, moving on.
But well, yeah. I mean, well, just the concept, anyways. Well, I think also the other reason why they have advanced so quickly too, anyways, is just the concept that it's just like
They aren't
it's
trying to
different.
kill
Kill it
anything else. Yeah.
is is which is the Imperium's concept is far different. I mean, they remind me of I can't remember what they called them, but they met up with it was a group of humans anyways that had their own little tiny empire in the Great Crusade, and it was a group of humans anyways that had formed this empire with I think like two other races of Xenos, and their technology was like almost more advanced at that point anyways than the Imperiums, and they had only been around for I think like it hadn't been around for very long if I recall right.
Yeah.
So it was just, yeah. So just that concept of we can work together as opposed to murder everything
Yeah.
seems to make technology work a little bit more. Well, I think it's also, anyways, I mean, because if you look, for instance, at like Terran 42, a lot of times when technology really advances, there's a couple reasons for that. It's like the combination, anyways, of peace and war, right? So,
Sorry. Well, what? Well, generally, when this is probably completely biased on my part, but generally, the cases are war or alcohol. Right.
fair enough.
And that's neither here nor there.
But
But war is one of the main methods that advances or some failed experiments that were planned to be used for wartime end up being utilized into something during peacetime.
right. Well, and then the other advancement though during peacetime would be competition. Competition breeds
Right.
bounding forward, anyways, and trying to bound forward. The
So I
problem
guess
with
conflict
yeah,
is the
conflict
word that
breeds
should be used.
success pretty much or advancement. But you get to a point. I mean, there has been a few times in humans' history that this has also taken place, but this is taking place in the empire of humanity, like right now, is this concept that they're just stagnant because they don't want to advance any farther than they already are.
We must follow the rules.
Yeah, the
We
space book
must,
says it's bad. Yeah,
and the rules aren't just, how to live your life. It's how everything has to be.
yeah.
Unfortunately, it's too definite. So it's like,
And that
We
being
have to stay within this structure of weapons and stuff.
and also being shunted down anyways, literally anyways, by the imperial cult.
Yeah.
I mean that aspect, and if you actually look in Terran 42, anyways, the times where you see the slowest technological advancements, anyways, is normally actually when religion kind of steps in and says, "No, you got to do it this way."
Yeah, perfect example of this is there's a story in one of the texts that I've read where these people are working undercover, and part of their job is to be in this area with a whole bunch of different mercenaries that are working for this Tau expansion group.
Mm.
And so they go to this like gun shop area, and they walk in there, and literally the person's just like, I have this weapon, and he hands him a weapon. It's an alien weapon. One of them, who's Imperial, obviously, is like, I can't have this. It's blasphemous or whatever. The immediate response is, oh, you're one of those guys. Yeah, we have some of the crap in the back, is basically the way it says.
Yeah,
Here's
we
some
could,
of your crap in the back. We prefer the better stuff up here.
right. Uh, it's yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest differences. And quite frankly, the other thing though is I think the Tau really just don't understand, anyways, humanity's huge aspect, anyways, for xenophobia. They're just
Yeah,
kind of sit there and they're kind of like, well, but you could help us, you know?
I think
We do like
part of
some of
that
the
though,
aspects of your technology. Why don't you help us? And we could do all this, and be better,
I do have to state that though, I think definitely one of the aspects of that though comes from the first races that they ended up running up against.
Right, which
I'm
which
sure it would
were
have been
so
drastically
much
different
different.
if the first people
Right.
that they ran into was like orcs
Yeah,
or
good
Tyranids.
point.
Then they'd
Yeah,
be like, okay, everything's just trying to kill us. We should just kill them back first.
yeah. That's a good point. I
I'd
never
rather
really thought
not
about
be
that.
dead.
Yeah. It's just like yeah. Well, and wasn't humanity the first Xenos they ran into pretty much was orcs, I think, wasn't it?
I think the first race that they came across that were basically hostile to them to the point of being considered hostile in their case.
Yeah, I mean, now, mind
Um,
you, anyways, by the time you get to the Great Crusade and the Emperor, anyways, the Emperor was very strict about this. He's just like, Xenos deserve to die because they had their
yeah,
shot with the galaxy, and now it's our turn. So, and it's not move out of the way. It's like, don't worry, we'll get rid of you. Because quite frankly, there should only be humans in the galaxy because that's the right thing to do. But we could
yes,
talk
a
about the
pleasant person the emperor was.
yes, he
We've
was such a nice
established that
guy.
he was amazing.
Uh,
Anyways, so
I
yeah, orcs
real
were the
quick,
first. I think the first real conflict group that they faced.
was
I mean, I think
was
there
the orc.
were other races that they came across where at first they were like, yeah, we're at conflict with them, but they're just like, yeah, we kind of understand that a lot of this has to deal with just complete misunderstanding. And then they run into the orcs, and it's like, okay,
Yeah,
we can understand them, but we understand that they really won't mesh with us at all. It's either us or them, basically.
right. Well, real quick, anyways, you said tell us about the different castes of the Tau.
So the Tau caste system is a social division that divides the Tau into five distinct groups or castes, hence caste system. Each caste is named after an element of nature, except for one of them, which is the ethereal. The Tau's caste is determined at birth and inherited by one's parents. The ethereals have made interbreeding forbidden. For a Tao to choose another caste for himself seems to be impossible and held contrary to the notions of the greater good. The castes are based upon the racial and political divisions that separated the Tao on their homeworld of Tao during the time of the Mon Tao, emphasizing the need for the greater good. The ethereals decreed that the Tao would be formalized into a caste, each known by the element that most befitted its role in the new Tao society. Would you like to talk about the first one on our list, the fire?
Yes. Now, the Fire Warriors of the Tau Empire are known as, well, the Fire Caste, or they're also known as the Shas caste. They are the ground forces of the Empire. You know, the guys in the battle suits. They average as tall or as slightly shorter than the average human and are generally muscular. This comes from the Fire Caste's origin on the plains of Tau and the Tau homeworld, where they survived as hunters and warriors. Now, if you recall right, anyways, in my origins, anyways, of them, these are the guys that came from the plains. But the Tau from the world of Viorla tend to have a slightly greater muscle mass than is common among their species because of the increased gravity of Viorla, which I kind of find interesting.
Kind of like the John Carter from Terran 42.
Yeah,
Mars has next to no gravity. I can fly.
the dancing flea. Nah. That kind of leads us into probably the next strongest one I'm thinking, anyways, which would be the Earth cast, right? I think they're the
Well,
like
when it comes
strength
to
wise.
yeah, strength wise, yes. The Earth caste, also known as Theo, is the caste based around the engineering, agriculture, industry, and construction fields. Pretty much they're the worker ants. By far they are the largest caste in sheer numbers. It is they who erect dwellings, provide food, and produce new technology. Members of the Earth caste are often described as plain and dour, possessing a rather stoic outlook on life in general.
I mean, no wonder they're stuck building everything. Uh,
Well,
sorry. Go ahead.
they were originally the first Tau to build cities and practice agriculture. So they were the first people to go up from, banging rocks uh, and starting fires with sticks.
No, no,
Uh,
no, no. They banged rocks, but they did it with a purpose.
like, we can use this for something completely different.
Well, that's my drum. No, no, no.
No, no.
We're going to put them together and then we're going to put mud around them. And look at this. We now have a house.
Yeah.
Sorry. Carry on, man.
Where was I? Ah, yes. The city of Town is an example of this, being the first place where the ethereals appeared. Most of the simple labor now is done by drones that the Earthcast has made, though. So
Mm. Yeah, and
now they can
probably
become overweight naturally.
no. No. Now, mind you, anyways, we will probably in the next upcoming weeks. The drones are actually a very important part to Tau society, and we will get to them, but we just don't have the time this week because we've got to move on with the rest of these casts. Like, for instance, the water cast or the Prora are one of the actually more interesting castes, in my humble opinion. Their main duties are merchants and diplomats. They are tasked with seeking and maintaining diplomatic relations with the other member species of the Tau Empire, as well as maintaining the ease of communication and cooperation between the other castes. The water castes are generally taller and slimmer than other Tau and favor diplomatic training and social grace over confrontation or combat. They are more capable in communicating in the languages of other intelligent species than most other Tau. From the time when the Tau discovered the existence of the Imperium, there are several accounts where water caste ambassadors were dispatched to imperial worlds, and those worlds accepted the greater good without a fight to become new Tau Seps. There are other records, though, where they showed up and they were just shot because they're Xenos. You know that's probably what happened the first time a water caste showed up, anyways, in an Imperium planet, right? Hello, we come in peace. He didn't even get the whole thing out before somebody shot him.
Well,
Some
and there's some of them that do have somewhat of an aggressive aspect.
true. But what's
Like,
next on our
you
list?
shot our guy. Somebody, we gotta kill somebody now. Like,
Okay.
why?
But hey,
Because our guy got shot for no reason.
Yuksen,
Okay.
who's next on our list?
We shall now move on to these astronauts. No, the air cast, or also known as the core. It is based around, like I kind of mentioned, air and space travel slash trade. The air cast is charged with holding the Tau Empire together through the Core Vatra, the Tau Empire's merchant and war fleet, in addition to operating Tau's orbitals and fortress stations. Formerly functioning as messengers, These days, they are the Tao's navy and are sometimes called the invisible caste, for they rarely, if ever, set foot upon planets. Living in orbital cities, Tau of the air caste are the tallest and most slender of all Tau, with long, skinny limbs and hollow bones developed due to the lives lived mostly in low and zero gravity ships and space stations. In the past, before the time of the Mon Tau, the Tau that originally became the air caste had membranes stretching between their limbs, allowing them to glide on air currents, kind of like the flying squirrels of Terran 42. Tau pilots tend to be superior pilots compared to their human counterparts because they have better depth perception and higher G tolerance. On the other hand, they do lack battle experience compared to the best Imperial fighter pilots, and can be assumed their caste also operates their air defenses within the Tau territory.
Now, before we actually discuss all these guys in kind of more of a, free form, we do have to talk about the weird ones, which would
The
be known as the
bosses,
secret cast of the Ethereals. Oh, what's that using?
the bosses.
Yeah, the boss.
It's a socialist place, but they do have bosses.
Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. But the Ethereals are the political and religious leaders of the Tau. They resemble the fire and water castes physically, but are marked by a diamond-shaped ridge of raised bone in the center of their foreheads. Their origins are unknown, and most Tau will never refuse a request made by an Ethereal. They are sometimes also found on the battlefield, but whether as leaders or observers remains to be a mystery. Sometimes. We'll get into that when we do our notable characters, because one of them, anyways, he's actually he, he's a space monk. That's the best way of describing him. He's pretty cool. But anyways, the leader of the ethereal caste is a Tau named Onva, the ethereal supreme and master of the undying spirit, who chaired the ethereal high council and served as the head of state, or On-O, of the Tau Empire. Now, before we do carry on with the other species that are in the Tau Empire, I think we do really need to go more into these castes. Right, brother?
Right. So one of the things that's interesting about them is they all have their counter names: Shas, Fio, Por, Kor, Alm. To identify the ranking of these, they use the same name, the same word after them. So, like for example, for a trainee rank in any of them, for like the fire caste, they're called underlings. Earth, it's apprentice, and then assistant for water. Deliver for core. So they're technically different titles.
Right.
All of
Which,
them, though, they'll they'll put a dash behind it, and then they'll use Sol, and that covers all of those. So long as you have like, okay, Shas, Sol, you know that okay, that person is in the fire caste, and they are underling.
right. Well, and then they have like it's a base name I think that their parents gave them after that, and then there's another part of their name, anyways. But the interesting part is that they really only have like their name literally is fluent throughout their entire lives. The higher they move up on the chain, anyways, with whatever they're doing, anyways, their name actually changes.
Yeah,
So it's like literally, anyways, like we've talked about, for instance, oh, Ursakar E. Creed, right? And his title is what? It's Lord Castellan, right?
right.
It would be like literally, anyways, his name would be Lord Castellan Creed. People would just that would be his name,
Yeah,
which to me, anyways,
and
is kind of interesting.
like you said, it changes. Like for example, you're starting off as the blunt recruit of the fire warrior cast. So
Right,
you just got your weapon. You're definitely going to be named Chasal. Like,
right,
okay, now you've become an official warrior. Your name has now changed to Shas La.
right,
Okay, now you're a veteran. Well, now you've changed to Shas Sui, and then you get up to, and then Commander. Then it's just Shas O.
right. Well, to me though, that I find interesting about that is I mean, like for instance, in like Terran 42, anyways, when you're talking to somebody that's in the military, normally, anyways, when somebody is talking to them, anyways, they refer to them by their last name instead of their first name. I mean, the
Yeah.
reason for that is because, I mean, can you imagine how many Johns are in the United States Army? There's more than five, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
This is like literally they do that, but the difference though is that literally, anyways, when they go to announce somebody's name, their name literally is their rank and file.
Yeah.
Which to me is very interesting, and it kind of goes into that same concept, anyways, that they're not allowed to interbreed anymore. This is very
Yeah.
much now. We've talked about how it's kind of interesting that these guys are kind of almost like good guys on the fact that they're really willing to trade and talk about peace and whatnot. But it is a very and everybody is equal in the eyes, and that's all nice and flowery and nice. But at the same time, if you really look at this, anyways, there is no room for movement here. It's
No.
not this concept of if you work hard and you try harder, you can do better. It's like, nope, you are stuck doing this your entire life.
Well,
But what if I don't want to be an
and
Earth guy?
advance in life. It's just you can't advance outside of
Right.
the caste. Like
So
you
like
can become like a genius, but it's not like you can become a genius engineer and
if
then
you're a
become
fire
all
warrior.
of a sudden a diplomat. It was like, no, 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 no.
Yeah. It's
You
like
could sell snake oil to anybody, but no. Sorry, you just no.
it's like if you were an Earth cast anyways, and you're just like, but you work out real hard and you've gotten yourself a gun, you're like the perfect marksman, kind of thing. They would just be like, yeah, that's a nice hobby, but no, you're not joining the fire cast.
In
That's
fact,
not happening.
why do you even have a gun? Give it
Yeah.
back.
In fact, we're gonna take that back. Thank you. We can use this for the greater good. So yeah, which also is the more insidious part about this, though, is that it also does always mean, anyways, that the ethereals will always be in charge. They've literally set it up that way because it's like, well, if you're not an ethereal, sorry, you, you just can't be in charge. So it's to me, anyways, it's interesting because they do have a lot of these like really frontward thinking ways of doing things, and then you have this like very rigid caste system that keeps everybody in line. And if you try to go outside of that, then you're punished.
Which is kind of funny because of the fact that they are directly connected with these other people in this
Right.
larger heading of the Tau Empire that don't follow the system at all.
They don't, but at the same time, anyways, they are set up in a position, anyways, where they will not go. They're set up with borders still. So
Well, yeah,
we're
it's
going
just
to
like
talk about
okay,
here in a minute. Hang on, I've seen these, and we're going to talk about in a minute, anyways. We're going to talk about the different races of the Tau Empire, at least
or some of them anyway.
the major ones, yeah. And while they all are, like they are given, it's like congratulations, you're part of the Tau Empire. You can do all sorts of different things. They still set up boundaries for these people. There's still like, for instance, a Groot is never going to be a commander in the Tau Empire. It's just not.
Definitely not a diplomat.
Yeah. Oh, which is well, we'll get to the Groot here in a minute. Which it actually would be kind of interesting if you had a Groot diplomat. There's some reasons why that might work, but
Well, actually, yeah, because of their interaction with so many people.
right.
But there's certain things that
Eating them anyways.
really would kind of break down talks pretty fast.
Right. But like I said, anyways, the Tau are the major species of the Tau Empire. And the Empire itself actually includes, like we just said, anyways, a plethora of alien species. And like Yuksen just said, anyways, we really can't get into all of them. There are like a bunches of them.
Yeah.
But we did pick, anyways. Well, what did we pick? We picked three. We picked three of
We
them,
picked
anyways, that
one.
are fairly important, and then we're gonna kind of talk about a couple of them, anyways, that are interesting. But I think if you don't mind, Yuksen, anyways, I think we were just talking about the Kroot, actually. Maybe we should start with the Kroot.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the Kroot originated on the world of Peck. And okay, so real quick, I just got to get this out of the way. I am Kroot. And they are from the world of Peck. So it's kind of flows fairly well. But anyway, sorry.
Ever
And
notice how it's peck and they have beak like?
well, actually, and Peck is spelled Pech. And if I recall right, anyways, in Terran 42, anyways, in I think Norse mythology, Peck is like isn't he like a forest god or something like that? Which would make sense here. And it would make sense with I am Groot. Anyways, regardless. Though the Kroot, anyways, their anatomy is humanoid, there is evidence to suggest that the roots of their evolution likely lie with the world's avian analogs. The Kroot do have beaks and have light, almost hollow bone structures with 4 digits on each hand and foot. Kroot skin is rough with small barbed spines, similar to the elongated quills on their heads, protruding from the various locations on their flesh. Skin pigmentation ranges from earthy brown colors and dappled greens to vibrant oranges and everything in between, depending on the feeding directions of the Kroot shapers. The coloration of each kindred can vary quite considerably. More about the shapers later. It is also common for Kroot from each kindred to have particular tribal markings painted onto their skin. Kroot mature very quickly, and their most rapid period of growth occurs in the first 10 years of their lives. By the age of 12 years, Kroot are considered adults, and it is not unknown for the Kroot to live to over 100 years old. Their skin does become incredibly pitted and leathery in the last few years of their life. Now, the Kroot tend to move on the ground with a bounding, hopping gait, but in dense forests, they can spring from tree to tree at great speed. The Kroot do favor primitive garb. Harnesses work from the hides of animals and adorned with bones, handcrafted amulets, and circlets. Now, you're probably wondering how the Kroot ended up getting involved with the Tau. Especially because if you look at the Kroot, anyways, they're nothing like the Tau. I mean, they love like melee combat. The Tau hate it. They,
By the way, Peck is actually in Terran 42's mythology a gnome-like creature from Scottish mythology.
oh, okay. I knew I recognized it. I
Short
just
in
didn't
height,
remember what
but
it was.
extremely strong.
There you go. They're almost like a leprechaun.
And brewed heather ale.
Yeah. Well, actually, no, that's not true because if I recall right, in ancient Irish mythology, leprechauns were actually giants. But regardless, we're getting off the field. But
Yeah.
but how they came in contact with the Tau is actually kind of fairly interesting. It was at the close of the Tau's first sphere expansion, an exploration fleet out of Delath picked up long-range scans of Orc warships firing on Kroot war spheres. The previously unencountered Kroot were defending their enclaves on the planet of Krath, although they were hopelessly outnumbered. Intended only to observe, the Tau were drawn into the battle as both the Air Caste Admiral and the Fire Caste Commander could not bear to watch the honorless Orcs bludgeon their way to victory. Quickly deploying their superior fleet, the Tau destroyed the ramshackle greenskin ships. Yet, too late, they realized that this was merely a vanguard of their mighty invasion force that was closing on them in an encircling pattern. Thus began an extended war, both in space and over several planets, later named the War in the Place of Union, for it marked the first time the Tau and the Kroot fought side by side. So effective was this sudden alliance that they withstood the Orcs long enough for reinforcements from Sakea to arrive and ultimately triumph over the Greenskins. The Tau were so impressed with the Kroot's fighting prowess that they agreed to extend the alliance to liberate the remainder of the Kroot enclaves, who were also under Orc attack. For the next 10 years, the Tau helped drive all signs of Orcs from the Kroot worlds, eventually coming to their homeworld of Peck, at the behest of the greatest of Kroot leaders, the legendary Unkok Prok. There, at the sacred Oathstone, the Kroot leader swore allegiance to the Tau Empire and pledged his warriors to fight for the greater good and regular payment, of course. That pledge and the cooperation between the two species is still honored today. The Kroot are, by far, the most common ally auxiliary force to serve in the Tau armies. Now, the Tau greatly value the military service of the Kroot, although they continue to hope that exposure to their own superior culture will eventually cure the Kroot of their cannibalistic tendencies.
Pardon me, brother, but did I hear you right? They're cannibals?
Why, yes. Yes, you did. But there is actually a reason for doing this. The consuming of their enemy's flesh alters their own biological evolution by genetically absorbing the traits and characteristics of other species. Due to this ability, the many warbands scattered across galaxies often look radically different from one another and can possess different abilities. Now, like I said before, the Kroot leaders are known as shapers, and they're generally the Kroot with the instinctive ability to recognize desirable or detrimental biological traits in defeated foes and instruct their kindred in what to eat to suit them so that they might evolve themselves to better deal with the environment they currently find themselves in. For example, a shaper who wants their Kroot to gain muscle mass will seek out conflicts with orcs to acquire orc genetic material geared towards physical size, while extensive feeding on flying predators will allow the shaper's Kroot to grow wings. This eating of their foes ties in with their religious beliefs as well. They believe that when a warrior of any species dies, his warrior spirit should be kept. And the only way to do this is by eating his flesh. The Kroot practice this in their funeral customs, in which the body of the deceased is consumed by the kindred. Kroot, who prey extensively on particular species, will begin to take on the characteristics of that creature. In sentient species such as orcs and humans, they may take on cultural aspects of that people as well. So it's
Imagine that for orcs, though. All of a
I'm
sudden,
just thinking that.
hey,
No, okay.
their
So
version of a mosh pit fight would be hilarious.
okay, okay. Well, wait a minute. Hang on half a second. If you've got Kroots, anyways, that have eaten enough orcs that they're like incredibly orky, do you think they would actually get along with the orcs just simply because they're so close to orcs at that point? It would be interesting.
They would probably be able to get along better.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's not saying much, though. I mean, because think about it. The orcs don't even get along with orcs. So,
Right.
anyways, regardless, the Kroot's digestive system is extremely efficient, capable of breaking down almost any organic material into an energy form that can be stored in specialized organs scattered throughout their bodies called nims. Should anything inorganic or indigestible be consumed, the Kroot must regurgitate it with considerable discomfort. However, the strangest quirk of Kroot digestion is their ability to extract potentially useful strands of the food's DNA. The Ductus mechanicus genitors have long been aware that much of the double helix structure of the DNA is used to structurally separate those regions of the genome that do contact usable genetic information. The Kroot have somehow inherited the ability to incorporate useful DNA sequences from other species into their own genetic makeup. Now, this process is not an exact science, and there have been times, anyways, where this hasn't worked very well. An example of that would be like, for instance, the Kroothawks and the Kroothounds, which kind of makes sense if you can actually see them. I mean, the Kroothawks are much larger and stronger, but became more lumbering creatures, much akin to the forest-dwelling herbivores than their more intelligent kin. The Kroothounds, on the other hand, became faster and leaner, but like the Kroothawks, their intelligence was reduced, becoming a little more than vicious predators. There's a bunch of these different, anyways, offshoots. It's almost like, actually, ironically, we were just talking about them. It's much like the orcs or orcoids, where you've got, like snotlings and grots and gets and goblins, but they're all and squigs, and they're all kind of centralized. They're all orcoids, kind of the same concept of the Kroot, roughly. In fact, they even have, anyways, like a giant squig, anyways. They have something called the gargantuan great Narlock. And they even have smaller ones, like small squigs, like the flying Kroot hawk. Isn't there a squig hawk? I think there's a squig hawk too, isn't there?
I believe so. Along with the squidgeon.
Yep. But they don't have a Kroot worm.
Or you probably have a grog worm.
They might even have a squig worm. Actually, some of those squigs do look like worms. But anyways, there are some things, anyways, that Kroots just can't eat. Which, for instance, anyways, they're unable to effectively shape the necrodermis living metals of the Necrons. They've tried a couple of times, and the worst that it showed, anyways, was on the Kroot world of Karok in 976.m41, where a nanoscarab plague swept through the Kroot ranks. They just kind of started popping out of the Kroots and killing everybody. So they avoid eating Necrons. But there are three, anyways, that the Kroot are completely forbidden to eating by the Shapers, which includes the Tyranids, as number one. The Tyranids, the Shapers have declared as unedible. Now, mind you, being unedible is as much as a moral designation as a gastronomic one for the Kroot culture. And because the Shapers are inherently repulsed by the Tyranids' particular way of changing their genetic makeup. I also must note, anyways, it's kind of interesting that if a Kroot eats someone, anyways, that's tainted by gene stealers, they can immediately know if they're actually, a hybrid gene stealer, even if they're not showing any visible signs. And then they throw it back up, and yeah. But then they know, anyways, they're dealing with gene stealers. Number two, they do not eat humans who worship chaos. Make that up as you will. And number three, this kind of goes without saying, the Tau. The Kroot respect the Tau due to their role in saving the Kroot's homeworld of Peck from the orcs. As a result, consuming Tau flesh has been made a crime in Kroot society that brings swift and deadly retribution from the Shapers to any who violate proscription. Now, the Kroot, they seem kind of weird, but they're nothing compared to the Vespid. The Vespid are so bizarre. You got to talk about the Vespid. They're out there.
Okay, so the Vespid, which, like the tower, named after their planet, the planet of Vespid,
You
the
know,
race was.
you raise a good point, Yuksen. I think the Kroot are the only ones that I know of, anyways, that their home planet isn't Kroot.
Oh, there probably are others. It's just
That was probably the
nobody
second planet
bothers to
that took
mention
over.
them. It's like, that race is like, okay, what can you tell us about that race? Nothing much. Where'd they come from? I don't know. It's like, how helpful is this?
Not at all.
We're just telling you they're there.
All right, sorry to interrupt. Carry on, man.
Okay, so the race was already fairly technologically adept when they were approached by the Tau Empire's water caste diplomats. It seemed unlikely that the Vespid would ever submit for the greater good, let alone come to any sort of terms with the Tau, because their mindset was so freakishly different than anything the Tau could understand that emissaries made little headway. And if you've seen them, you can kind of see why their mindset's so different. But however, the Ethereals provided Vespids with a communication interface device, which facilitated a degree of understanding between the two races. Afterwards, the Vespids welcomed their place in the Tau Empire and became completely compliant, calmly accepting total annexation by the Tau Empire. Now, the inhabitants of the planet Vespid are a bipedal, vaguely insectoid race which have a sturdy, chitinous exoskeletal barbed armor that encases their bodies. They stand somewhat taller than the average human and appear to be much faster due to the chitinous wing-like protrusions on their back, which emit a ultrasonic tone, which they use to control and modulate their technology. They have three pairs of eyes running in two lateral lines down their faces. One perceives ultraviolet light, one perceives normal visible spectrum, and the other sees infrared. Their mouths are an arrangement of mandibles, each with a row of sharp teeth. Vespid warriors called stingwings form a tactical unit referred to as strains. Each strain is led by a strain leader. Because the Vespid language is so complex, presumably because of their complex mouths, and only the strain leaders are given the apparatus to translate their language to their Tau allies, Vespid strains are very close-knit, and a lot of reliance on the strain leaders comes from both sides. Stingwing strains are highly sought after in Tau Fire Warrior cadres because of their high level of maneuverability. They are often used by Tau commanders alongside crisis battle suits or used in a scouting role, backing up pathfinders. In the Tau language, they are referred to as Malkor, which comes from the meaning of mal, meaning insect, and kor, of course, meaning air. The Vespid's technology is based around exotic crystals only found on the bottoms of the floating islands of their homeworld, which they control with ultrasonic sounds manipulated from their wings. From the Tau, they have gained armor and weaponry, and a Vespid communion helm that enables them to more freely communicate with other races, as their own language, as mentioned before, is extremely complex and, for the most part, inimitable. Their weapons are a mixture of Tau technology and Vespid resources, which enables them to act as specialists against heavily armored troops, most notably the Space Marines, of whom the Tau have always had a problem fighting against. The neutron blaster that they normally carry is a unique blending of Tau technology and the unstable radioactive crystals that Vespids mine. The energy harnessed from the crystal allows the weapon to strip atoms off of the target. Due to the Vespid's wings creating different harmonic resonances within the crystal, they are the only creatures able to wield the neutron blaster effectively.
Mhm.
Now, this is a species that everybody knows who they are, but how
Yeah,
about you discuss, how they've some of them have integrated into the Tau Empire?
very well said. As you might have guessed, anyways, the next Xenos on this list is, well, humans. The Tau Empire hosts a growing population of humans, known in the Tau lexicon as Javesa, who were once a part of the Imperium, ranging from ideological defectors who hate the brutality and corruption of the Imperial government to captured Imperial guardsmen and their children, who have known no other life than that among the Tau. They've been fully incorporated into the Empire. For the most part, the Gavesa are content and treated well, and are even allowed to continue the worship of the god Emperor, though the Tau water caste moves subtly among them to discourage this religion and replace it with the reverence for the greater good. The ethereal caste of the Tau understand that the best path to survival in the face of the Imperium of man's colossal war machine lies in the peaceful absorption of imperial worlds and assets wherever possible. In pursuit of this objective, the Tau water caste has launched many diplomatic missions with varying degrees of success in turning imperial citizens to the service of the greater good. The Tau face steep opposition to this effort, as most humans of the Imperium display a fierce hatred for all Xenos and an abiding belief in the human supremacist doctrines of the Imperial Creed. Some of the water caste initiatives have resulted in the smooth transition of an imperial planet to a new allegiance to the Tau Empire, while others have unleashed the full wrath of the Imperium on the Tau. Knowing every victory of diplomacy spares them a potentially costly military campaign, the Ethereals and Watercasts attempt to appeal to every level of imperial society by emphasizing the many different aspects of the greater good. To broaden the appeal of the membership in the Tau Empire, the Tau guarantee protections from the imperial retribution to rebellious planetary governors. They also promise the nobility who control planetary commerce lucrative new sources of income and new technologies in the Tau Empire, where they will be free from the Imperium's mandatory ties and excessive bureaucracy. The Tau also promise that all humans will be allowed to enjoy the freedom of religion, so long as the practice of that faith does not conflict with the greater good, like, for instance, killing Xenos wherever they find them. This is a freedom that is unimaginable on Imperial worlds, where rigid adherence to the Imperial cult is always enforced, normally by death. Perhaps the most alluring aspect of the greater good to the common Imperial citizen is the belief that all those who contribute towards it have a meaningful and valued place within Tau society, as opposed to the place of relatively low value the Imperium places on individual human life. The Tau seem to believe that everyone has a place and everyone matters. A perfect example of this process occurred during the Taros campaign, when the desert mining world of Taros was annexed by the Tau Empire. Not only did the population of Taros not oppose the move, since the world had developed an extremely lucrative trade in strategic ores with the Tau, but the Tarosian Planetary Defense Force actually fought against the Imperium forces sent to reclaim the world for the Emperor as Guvesa, shoulder to shoulder with their new Tau allies. Many of the Gavesa can trace their origins back to the Democles Gulf Crusade, when the First Imperial War against the Tau ground to a stalemate. The Imperial forces decided to retreat and redeploy their forces against a much more pressing threat in the eastern fringes of the galaxy, namely, as you know, the Tyrant Hive Fleet Behemoth. However, what we didn't mention before was the withdrawal was so fast that many troops of the Astra Militarum were simply abandoned in Tau controlled regions of space. Oshova, or Commander Farsight, as he was known in the Imperium, gave these humans the option of joining the Tau Empire, an offer that most accepted. They were treated well by the Tau and were even allowed to continue worshiping the God Emperor and maintain their faith in the Imperial cult. Though this version of the faith was purged of the fanatic and xenophobic sentiments that were commonplace in the Imperium. Duh. As time passed, these humans and their children turned from being reluctant converts to enthusiastic believers in the greater good. They now hope to spread the greater good and what they view as an extraordinary benefits of the Tau Empire to all of their fellow human beings across the galaxy.
Now, while we both said we couldn't go through all the races of the Tau Empire, here are a few blurbs on some of the other intriguing Xenos races. The first one that they ever actually added to their empire were known as the Nikasar. The Nikasar are a psychic xenorace who were the first addition to the Tau Empire. They are highly psychic, fearing that the Imperium's distress of psychers would intensify their already dangerous xenophobia. The Tau have carefully kept them hidden from humans. Physically, Nikasars are ursine in appearance, and they have ivory hair quills and stubby clawed limbs. They possess no eyes, instead sensing their surroundings with psychic abilities generated by glands in their avian skulls. Nikasar are described as having long furred snouts. When communicating with Tau, a Nikasar always floats in a special heliosphere.
They're pancake polar bears that float, aren't they?
Well, they don't have eyes.
Oh, fair enough. So they're blind. Pancake polar bears that float around. Gotcha.
They
So
are described as having limited mobility and being unfit for ground combat, and so further the greater good by providing ships for the Tau fleet, especially for the roles of scouting and exploring. The Nigasar are driven by an insatiable curiosity to explore and travel, becoming semi nomadic and most content when traveling. They are able to place themselves into a state of hibernation, allowing them to survive for long periods. Nigasar also have a prophecy of doom known as the Halloween, which foretells the ending of the galaxy.
now another unusual Xenos are the Brachira, who joined the Tau Empire native to a planet of, well, the same name. I mean, and we see this reoccurring pattern. A tiny dexterous limbed crustacean race. They are unmatched in the delicate assembly of small plasma generators needed to fuel the Tau Earth caste inventions. So they're like little crab peoples. But what do you think of all these interesting races that are within the Tau Empire, brother?
So I know I mentioned this before, but the example of the creatures that my brother just mentioned, the Tau, even no matter how weird they are,
Hmm.
the Tau tend to utilize them for
Hmm.
different things. They don't just go, yeah, you're under our control now.
They give him a job.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, they do give him a job. The funny thing is, to me, anyways, is that like this has been humanity, like especially the Brachyria. They would just simply, anyways, take one look at these things, and they would just be a fun
They
game
look
for the
good.
Space Marines to step on. You know, they make this wonderful
Or
crunching sound when you step on
or they're just like, ooh, those look like they would be good
crap.
to eat.
Yeah, yeah, that or that too.
Get the frying pans, boys. Seafood's on the menu.
Seafood's on the menu. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, especially like these last two. I do, by the way, love the fact, anyways, that they found a race of Xenos, anyways, that are like literally floating pancake polar bears. To me, that's awesome. And they're incredibly psychic. That's the other thing too. Now, when they say psychic, does that mean, anyways, like they can use the powers of the warp to like, like destroy things, or are they just they use it? You said they're also incredibly curious, so I just can't picture a pol. Let me put it this way: I just can't picture a polar bear not being dangerous, even if they are the shape of a pancake and they float on a little sphere thing. I just
Well, they only have little small limbs. It makes things a bit harder.
it's just, to me anyways, so interesting anyways that the Tau have accepted all these different races, and they have brought them in, and they've given them, like, employment and concepts anyways of how they can better the empire, which is so drastically different than what we have talked about anyways for the last several months. There is no other Xenos race that does this, is there? Nothing
Not
even
that I
close.
can think of.
I mean, well, we haven't really gotten much into the Eldar, but I don't think the Eldar do either.
No.
I think that's because the ego precedes the Eldar. We don't need your help, whoever you are. But I mean, this is what makes the Tau to me, anyways, very interesting. This is just incredibly unusual and completely, people, anyways, in the Imperium would say ignorant, right?
Right.
Because they're just like, you're eventually going to find a race, anyways, that just wants to kill all of you. And then they will try, even though you've invited them in. And, well, I can kind of agree with that. At the same time, the Tau do possess a lot of great technologies. So I think the Tau's concept is like, well, if we do run into, like, for instance, orcs or something like that, and we do try to, by the way, worst job ever, anyways, for a water cast. the first emissary they sent to an orc. That'd be even worse
Yeah.
than sending the first one sent to. Uh, Actually, you know what? The orc wouldn't be half bad. The Tyrannid would be worse. Because not only would the guy get killed, but then, I mean, they like literally like digest his biomass. And then, to me, anyways, that's just not a good way to go. I don't know, but to me, this is fairly interesting. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I wholeheartedly agree with you.
And it seems to be bearing some sort of fruit to it too. I mean, like I said, we only talked about what, 4 different races that are also part of the Tau Empire. There are like what, hundreds?
There is a lot.
There's a lot of them. Yeah. Yeah. To me, anyways, that's just, I mean, it shows anyways a higher intelligence actually than humanity at this point. Now, mind you, humanity we're in the Indominus era, and they're begrudgingly kind of starting to move a little bit in a different direction. I mean, like, for instance, Rabute Gilliman has worked with the Eldar occasionally. uh, he's kind of okay with that. But, I mean, I think the only way that humanity is going to survive is that they take the kind of a lot of the same concepts, anyways, as the Tau do. Now, mind you, I'm not saying, anyways, that they actually, form an alliance with the Tau, or, I mean, that wouldn't be a bad idea, but, like, become annexed by them by any means. What I mean is just this concept of more like exploratory as opposed to extermination, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, well, I think I've spoken my piece. Do you got anything else, anyways, that you want to mention about these aliens?
No.
Well, folks, I believe we actually have run out of time this week. But join us next week as we delve more into this upstart race and their dealings with the Imperium of Man, as well as the other aliens and chaos of the Milky Way system. If you enjoyed this Vox, feel free to subscribe, comment, follow, and like. And if you really like our stuff, please join our membership squad on the YouTube channel, Tales of Ashraka. Now, mind you, we don't have any members, so you could be the very first. With your support, we can continue to build and grow our Voxes, as well as some cool extra stuff for you guys that join. Once again, we need the support of you, our dear listeners, so we can continue to make a successful show that you all enjoy.
We will also be opening up a shop for you guys to get some sweet swag.
Oh, Yuksen, I actually got some interesting news on that front.
Really?
Yes. This week I finished up the shop and it is now live. Attached to this description of this Vox is the link to the shop. But don't worry, eventually it will be attached to our YouTube channel. Now, I do have to warn you, at this point anyways, I don't think there's actually anything in the shop. Because we had some technical difficulties, but we are working on that. It is actually officially built, and it is up and running with nothing in it.
Cool. But if you are listening on Spotify, don't worry. You can help as well. If you click the support podcast button on any of the descriptions on Spotify, you can donate to our success too.
Well, I think that's enough grandstanding for us today. I'll just go ahead and get off my soapbox and say as always.
Until next time, this is Zeckthar,
And Yuksen.
signing off.